The marble lobby of Sterling and Associates gleamed under crystal chandeliers, adorned with purple and gold banners celebrating International Women's Day. March 8, 2024. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stepped off the elevator onto the 35th floor, my heels clicking against imported Italian tile. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The entire floor had been transformed into a celebration space. Tables, draped in white linen, displayed elaborate floral arrangements featuring purple roses and golden lilies. A professional photographer moved between groups of smiling executives, capturing moments for the company's social media campaign. Above the main stage, a massive banner read, "Sterling and Associates, empowering women in finance since 1987. My stomach twisted with an unease I couldn't name. In my 12 years at this investment firm, surprise celebrations on weekday mornings had always preceded someone's professional execution. Victoria Sterling Morrison, our CEO and daughter of the firm's founder, swept onto the stage wearing a tailored cream blazer and that practiced smile she reserved for board meetings and terminations. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, every strand in place, every gesture calculated. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone born into power. "Today, we celebrate the incredible women who drive our success." The crowd applauded politely. But celebration also means making bold decisions for our future. That's when her eyes found mine across the room, and I knew. As part of our strategic realignment, Victoria continued, never breaking eye contact. "With me, we're streamlining our portfolio management division. Effective immediately, Madison Chen's position has been eliminated." The applause died instantly. Someone's champagne flute hit the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the sudden silence. 12 years of perfect performance reviews, of bringing in over $200 million in client assets, of working weekends while others played golf with prospects, and this was my send-off. I stood slowly, smoothing my navy dress, feeling 300 pairs of eyes tracking my every movement. The camera flash from the photographer felt like a spotlight on my humiliation. Around me, colleagues I'd mentored stared at their shoes, unable to meet my gaze. Security appeared at my elbow with rehearsed professionalism, two men in dark suits who'd probably escorted dozens of others before me. I didn't resist as they guided me toward the exit, my chin high, my spine straight. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break, but as we passed the main conference room, I caught a glimpse of something that made my pulse quicken. Projected on the wall was a presentation slide titled, "Q1 Portfolio Performance Leaders." At the top of the list, in bold letters, Madison Chen, $47 million in new assets, 23% above target. They were celebrating their top performer's termination on International Women's Day. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. As the elevator doors closed, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to a contact I'd hoped never to use. "It's time. Execute Plan Nightingale." The response came instantly, "Understood. Phase 1 initiated." 3 hours later, I sat in a coffee shop in Chelsea, staring at my laptop screen while nursing a cup of Earl Grey that had long gone cold. The adrenaline from my public humiliation had crystallized into something sharper, determination. My phone buzzed with sympathetic messages from colleagues, but I ignored them. Instead, I opened an encrypted folder I'd been building for the past 18 months, ever since I'd first suspected Victoria was planning to push me out. The folder contained everything, screenshots of internal emails discussing my difficult personality and lack of team spirit, code words they used when a woman asked for credit where credit was due. Records of client meetings where my strategies were implemented but my contributions mysteriously disappeared from the official notes. Documentation of how my male colleagues received promotions while I was told I needed more leadership presence. But most importantly, it contained something Victoria Sterling Morrison didn't know existed. My father had been a whistleblower attorney before his death 5 years ago. As his cancer progressed, he'd spent his final months teaching me everything about corporate warfare, how to gather evidence, how to protect yourself, and most crucially, how to strike back when they least expected it. "Madison," he told me during one of our last conversations, his voice weak but his eyes still fierce, "they'll try to erase you because they fear you. Don't let them. Build your ark before the flood comes." I'd built my ark meticulously. Every client interaction was documented. Every successful strategy was backed up with timestamped emails and meeting recordings, all perfectly legal in New York's one-party consent state. Every dollar I'd brought to the firm was tracked with military precision. The centerpiece of my collection was a series of recordings from Sterling's monthly partner meetings I'd never been invited to despite managing the firm's largest client portfolio. Thanks to a carelessly placed phone during a client Presentation in the adjacent conference room, I'd captured 12 months of conversations that would make employment lawyers salivate. Victoria's voice was particularly clear on one recording from last November. Madison's performance is undeniable. But she's becoming a problem. She's making the other portfolio managers look bad, and frankly, she's asking too many questions about compensation disparities. We need to find a way to ease her out before she becomes a liability. Her business partner, Robert Hendricks, had laughed. On International Women's Day? That would send quite a message. Exactly the message I want to send, Victoria had replied. Let's see how empowered she feels then. They'd planned my termination 4 months in advance, timing it for maximum humiliation. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated who they were dealing with. I closed the laptop and pulled out a burner phone, dialing a number I'd memorized but never used. The voice that answered was crisp and professional. Chen calling for Morrison, I said, using the code phrase my father had given me. Madison Chen? I've been expecting your call for months. Sarah Nightingale, investigative journalist, New York Times. Your father saved my career once. I owe him a debt. Are you ready to collect? I've been ready since the day you first contacted me. Send me everything. Within 6 hours, Sarah Nightingale had transformed from stranger to surgical strike partner. We met at a discreet restaurant. In the village, where she spread my documentation across the table like a general planning a campaign. Sarah was nothing like I'd expected. Mid-40s, with prematurely gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. She wore no makeup and a simple black sweater, but there was an intensity about her that made the air around our table feel charged. This is extraordinary, she said, reviewing the partner meeting recordings. But it's also just the beginning. If we're going to take down Sterling and Associates, we need to think bigger. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a spreadsheet she'd compiled in the past few hours. Your termination is part of a pattern. In the last 3 years, Sterling has eliminated 15 senior women, all high performers, all under suspicious circumstances. You're not the first, you're just the most documented. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My blood ran cold as I scanned the names. Jennifer Walsh, terminated 2 weeks after landing a $50 million client. Patricia Rodriguez, let go during her maternity leave. Samantha Brooks, fired the day she submitted a harassment complaint against a male partner. They're systematically purging women from leadership positions, Sarah continued. Victoria Sterling Morrison talks about empowerment in public while orchestrating a gender-based house cleaning in private. Your case is the smoking gun that proves the pattern. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. But here's what makes this story explosive. Sterling and Associates is about to announce a merger with Blackstone Financial. The deal is worth $800 million and hinges on their reputation as a progressive, women-friendly firm. They've built their entire brand around Victoria's mother's legacy as a pioneering female CEO. The pieces clicked into place. They fired me on International Women's Day to send a message to other women, but they also exposed themselves. If this story breaks before the merger, Blackstone will run screaming, Sarah finished. No one wants to inherit a discrimination lawsuit and a PR nightmare. But timing is everything. We need to be surgical, systematic, and absolutely bulletproof. She handed me a business card for a law firm I'd never heard of. Mitchell, Park and Associates. They specialize in employment discrimination and they're very, very good. Jennifer Mitchell is expecting your call. As I took the card, Sarah's expression grew serious. Madison, what we're about to do will change your life forever. Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Sterling will come after you with everything they have. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Victoria's smug smile as she announced my termination. I thought about 12 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and finally discarded like yesterday's coffee. I thought about all the women who'd been silenced before me and all the ones who would be silenced after if nothing changed. I've been preparing for this moment my entire career, I said. Let's burn it all down. The law offices of Mitchell, Park and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown, but Jennifer Mitchell's corner office felt more like a war room than a legal practice. The walls were lined with case files, and a massive whiteboard covered one wall, filled with timelines, names, and legal citations. Jennifer Mitchell was a force of nature, early 50s, with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of presence that made opposing counsel nervous. She'd built her reputation destroying companies that thought they could hide behind corporate lawyers and settlement agreements. Your documentation is exceptional, she said, reviewing my files for the 3rd time. Most discrimination cases rely on circumstantial evidence and pattern recognition. You've handed me a smoking gun with audio recording. She stood and walked to the whiteboard, adding my name to a timeline that already included the other terminated women. But we're not just building an individual case here. We're building a class action that will reshape how Wall Street treats women. Over the next 2 weeks, Jennifer's team worked with military precision. Private investigators interviewed former Sterling employees, finding a pattern of discrimination that went back years. They discovered that women at Sterling earned an average of 23% less than their male counterparts, despite often outperforming them. They found evidence of a boys' club culture where real business was conducted at strip clubs and golf courses. That excluded women. Most damaging of all, they uncovered Sterling's internal succession planning documents, confidential files that rated employees on cultural fit and leadership potential, using criteria that systematically disadvantaged women and minorities. But Jennifer wanted more than just a legal victory. She wanted to ensure this story had maximum impact. Corporate America only responds to 2 things, she told me during one of our strategy sessions: money and public humiliation. We're going to give them both in doses they'll never forget. Meanwhile, Sarah Nightingale was building her exposé with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. She'd interviewed 12 former Sterling employees, compiled salary data from public filings, and traced the company's marketing materials that promoted their commitment to diversity while practicing the opposite. The story was scheduled to run in 3 phases. First, a front-page exposé in the Sunday Times business section. Second, a follow-up investigative piece revealing the broader pattern of discrimination. Third, an opinion piece by Sarah about how International Women's Day had become a corporate performance while real discrimination continued unchecked. But 3 days before publication, Victoria Sterling Morrison made a move that changed everything. She called me directly. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, jolting me awake in my Brooklyn apartment. Victoria's voice was different than I'd ever heard it, stripped of its usual corporate polish, raw with desperation. "Madison, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Victoria. Please. One conversation. Face to face. You. Name the place." Something in her tone made me pause. This wasn't the confident CEO who'd terminated me in front of 300 people. This was someone who'd realized she was standing on quicksand. We met the next morning at a neutral location. The lobby bar of the Carlyle Hotel, empty except for a few business travelers nursing overpriced coffee. Victoria arrived looking like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect appearance showing cracks. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her cup. "You were always one of our best," she began, attempting her old warmth. "Your termination was, perhaps hasty. We're prepared to make this right." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer that made my breath catch: reinstatement as senior managing director, a 40% salary increase, equity participation, and a public apology. The package was worth nearly $300,000 more than my previous compensation. "We could announce it next week," she continued. "A celebration of women in leadership. You'd be our poster child for advancement, promotion on International Women's Day week." Full circle. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. "And, in exchange? You withdraw any legal action. Sign a comprehensive NDA. We all move forward, stronger than before." The offer was generous enough to change my life. I could buy the apartment I'd been renting, pay off my student loans, build the security I'd been chasing for years. It would be so easy to take it, to let them rewrite history, to pretend the humiliation had never happened. But then I thought about Patricia Rodriguez, fired during maternity leave. About Jennifer Walsh, terminated after her biggest success. About all the women who'd been erased from Sterling's story, who'd never get this offer, who'd been silenced by NDAs and settlements. "Victoria," I said finally, "do you know what you said at the partner meeting last November?" Her face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "You said my performance was undeniable, but I was becoming a problem. You planned my termination 4 months in advance, timing it for International Women's Day to send a message." Your words, not mine. The color drained completely from her face. "Madison, if you have recordings, I have everything," I interrupted. 12 months of partner meetings. Salary disparities. Performance reviews that were mysteriously altered. Internal emails about getting rid of difficult women. Should I continue? She leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking older than her 58 years. "What do you want?" "I want you to remember this conversation on Sunday morning when you read the New York Times. I want you to think about all the women you've pushed out, all the careers you've destroyed, all the messages you've sent. And I want you to understand that actions have consequences." I stood to leave, but Victoria grabbed my wrist. "Madison, please. The merger, if this story breaks, it will destroy everything we've built." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. You should have thought about that before you decided to make an example of me. I walked out of the Carlisle Hotel knowing that the point of no return was behind me. In 48 hours, the world would know exactly what kind of company Victoria Sterling Morrison really ran. Sunday morning, March 17, 2024. I woke before dawn and walked to the newsstand on Court Street, my hands shaking slightly as I picked up the New York Times. There, above the fold on the front page of the business section, was Sarah Nightingale's byline and a headline that made my heart race. Sterling and Associates fired top performer on International Women's Day as part of systematic discrimination campaign. Below the headline was my company photo from the Sterling website, next to a smaller photo of Victoria Sterling Morrison at a women's leadership conference from last year. The juxtaposition was perfect, the smiling executive preaching empowerment while systematically destroying women's careers. Sarah's article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. She'd structured it like a legal brief, building from my specific case to the broader pattern of discrimination. The opening paragraph was devastating. Madison Chen's 12-year career at Sterling and Associates ended not with recognition for bringing in $200 million in client assets, but with a public termination orchestrated as corporate theater on International Women's Day. According to internal recordings obtained by The Times, her firing was planned months in advance as part of what executives called sending a message to other women at the firm. The article detailed everything: the partner meeting recordings, the salary disparities, the pattern of female terminations, the succession planning documents that revealed systematic bias. But Sarah had also done something brilliant. She'd connected Sterling's discrimination to their upcoming merger with Blackstone Financial, making it a business story as much as a social justice one. The most damaging section featured direct quotes from the recordings. Victoria Sterling Morrison's voice is clearly audible in a November 2023 partner meeting. Madison's performance is undeniable, but she's becoming a problem. She's making the other portfolio managers look bad, and frankly, she's asking too many questions about compensation disparities. We need to find a way to ease her out before she becomes a liability. By 8 a.m., my phone was ringing constantly. CNN wanted me for their morning show. CNBC was requesting an interview. The Wall Street Journal was working on a follow-up story. Fox Business, Bloomberg, MSNBC, everyone wanted to talk to the woman who'd recorded her own company's discrimination strategy, but the real fireworks started when Sterling and Associates tried to respond. Their first statement, released at 10 a.m., was a masterclass in corporate damage control gone wrong. Sterling and Associates categorically denies any discriminatory practices. Ms. Chen's termination was based solely on performance concerns and strategic restructuring needs. Any recordings were obtained illegally and taken out of context. The problem was, the recordings weren't illegal. New York is a one-party consent state. And claiming my termination was performance-based while the article detailed my record-breaking results made them look either incompetent or dishonest. Their second statement, released 2 hours later, made things worse. While we stand by our decision regarding Ms. Chen, Sterling and Associates recognizes the importance of fostering an inclusive workplace. We are conducting an internal review of our policies and procedures. Sarah called me laughing. They just admitted they might have a problem. Their legal team is probably having a collective aneurysm right now. By noon, the story had exploded across social media. Hashtag International Women's My Ass was trending on Twitter, with thousands of women sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination. LinkedIn was flooded with posts from Sterling employees, current and former, describing the company's toxic culture. The most viral post came from Jennifer Walsh, the portfolio manager who'd been terminated after landing a major client. Madison Chen is a hero. She did what I was too scared to do. She documented everything and fought back. Sterling and Associates destroyed my confidence, but seeing Madison's courage is helping me rebuild it. Thank you for speaking truth to power. But the biggest shock came at 3 p.m., when Blackstone Financial released their own statement. Blackstone Financial is deeply concerned by the allegations reported in today's New York Times. We are immediately suspending all merger discussions with Sterling and Associates pending a thorough investigation of these matters. Blackstone is committed to partnering only with organizations that share our values of equity, inclusion, and ethical business practices. The $800 million merger was dead. Victoria Sterling Morrison's life's work was crumbling in real time, broadcast across every major news network and social media platform in America. By Monday morning, Sterling and Associates was in full crisis mode. Sarah had sources inside the company feeding her information about the panic unfolding behind closed doors. Emergency board meetings, crisis management consultants, partners screaming at each other, the prestigious investment firm was imploding. Victoria made her first public appearance on CNBC's Squawk Box at 7 a.m., looking like she'd aged 5 years in 2 days. Her usual confidence was replaced by barely controlled desperation as she faced hostile questions from anchors who'd clearly done their homework. Ms. Sterling Morrison, the lead anchor, pressed, "Ms. Chen's recordings seem to clearly show you planned her termination months in advance, timing it for International Women's Day. How do you explain that? Those recordings were taken without consent and edited to create a false narrative," Victoria replied, her voice tight. Madison Chen was terminated for legitimate business reasons after her performance declined significantly. The anchor didn't let up. "But your own internal documents show Ms. Chen exceeded her targets by 23% in the quarter before her termination. How do you reconcile that with claims of declining performance?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "There are many factors that go into personnel decisions beyond just numbers, such as asking questions about compensation disparities? Because that's specifically mentioned in the recordings as one of her problems." The interview was a disaster. Victoria's deflections and contradictions only made Sterling look more guilty. By the time it ended, #VictoriaLied was trending alongside #InternationalWomen'sMyAss, but Victoria wasn't finished fighting. That afternoon, Sterling's legal team filed a motion to block further publication of the recordings, claiming they violated attorney-client privilege and contained trade secrets. They also sent a cease and desist letter to the New York Times and launched a whisper campaign questioning my mental health and professional competence. Jennifer Mitchell was ready for them. "They just made the biggest mistake of their legal careers," she told me over the phone. "Filing that motion means they're admitting the recordings are real and unedited. And attacking your character? That's going to backfire spectacularly." She was right. The legal motion became its own news story, with legal experts explaining on cable news how it essentially confirmed the authenticity of the recordings. Meanwhile, the character assassination attempts only generated more sympathy and support. The real game changer came Wednesday, when Sarah published her follow-up investigation. This piece revealed that Sterling's discrimination went beyond gender. They'd also systematically excluded racial minorities from leadership positions and had a documented pattern of retaliation against anyone who raised concerns. The story included interviews with 8 former employees, all telling similar stories of a toxic culture where advancement required fitting into Victoria's narrow vision of cultural fit. Most damaging was testimony from Robert Hendricks, Victoria's business partner, who'd apparently had a crisis of conscience and decided to cooperate with the investigation. "Victoria runs Sterling like her personal kingdom," Hendricks was quoted as saying. "If you're not in her inner circle, white, male, and willing to play politics, you're expendable." The Madison Chen situation was just the latest example of a pattern that's been going on for years. By Thursday, the damage was irreversible. 3 major clients had withdrawn their assets, totaling over $400 million. The SEC announced they were opening an investigation into Sterling's employment practices. The Department of Labor filed their own discrimination complaint. Congressional representatives were calling for hearings on gender discrimination in financial services, but the final blow came from an unexpected source. Victoria's own daughter, Emily Sterling Morrison, was a rising star at a competing firm. And she chose Thursday evening to publish an open letter on Medium that went viral within hours. "I am Victoria Sterling Morrison's daughter, and I am ashamed. I chose not to work for my mother's company because I saw firsthand how she treated women who threatened her authority. Madison Chen is everything my mother pretends to be: brilliant, principled, and genuinely committed to excellence. My mother destroyed her to protect her own ego, and in doing so, revealed exactly who she really is." The letter included Emily's own experiences of watching her mother undermine female employees, detailed accounts of family dinners where Victoria mocked difficult women at work, and a devastating conclusion: Madison Chen didn't just record my mother's discrimination, she exposed a system that has been protected by silence for too long. I hope other women find the courage to speak their truth, no matter who they have to stand up to, even if it's their own mother. 3 weeks after the Times story broke, I found myself sitting at a witness table in the Rayburn House office building, facing the House Financial Services Committee. The hearing room was packed with reporters, advocates, and Sterling employees who'd flown to Washington to watch their former CEO face congressional scrutiny. Committee Chairwoman Maria Santos had positioned this hearing as a landmark moment in the fight for workplace equality. "Ms. Chen," she began, "your courage in documenting and exposing systematic discrimination has sparked a national conversation about women's treatment in the financial industry. Can you walk us through what happened at Sterling and Associates?" For the next hour, I detailed everything. The pattern of discrimination, the planning of my termination, the company's retaliation after the story broke. I played excerpts from the recordings that had been cleared for public release, and the committee room fell silent as Victoria's voice filled the space, casually discussing how to eliminate problem women. But the most powerful moment came when Representative James Wilson, a conservative Republican known for opposing workplace discrimination laws, asked me a question that surprised everyone. "Ms. Chen, I have to ask, if Sterling had offered you a significant promotion and raise instead of firing you, would we be here today?" I paused, considering my answer carefully. "Congressman, they did offer me exactly that after the story broke. A 40% raise, senior director position, equity participation. But they also wanted me to sign an NDA that would prevent me from ever speaking about what I'd experienced." "And you turned it down?" "I turned it down because this was never about me getting ahead. It was about stopping a system that destroys women's careers for sport. You don't fix discrimination by bribing the victims to stay quiet." The room erupted in applause, and even Representative Wilson nodded approvingly. When Victoria took the witness stand, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Gone was the composed executive I'd known for 12 years. She looked frail, defensive, and thoroughly unprepared for the hostile reception she received from both sides of the aisle. Chairwoman Santos led off with devastating precision. "Ms. Sterling Morrison, in November 2023, you told your partners that Madison Chen was becoming a problem because she was asking too many questions about compensation disparities. Do you stand by that assessment?" "Congresswoman, that comment was taken out of context. What context makes it appropriate to target an employee for asking about pay equity?" Victoria stumbled through non-answers and deflections, but the committee wasn't having it. Representative after representative pressed her on specific incidents, specific decisions, specific discriminatory actions. When she tried to claim that Sterling promoted women regularly, they confronted her with data showing that in 5 years, only 2 women had been promoted to senior roles while 17 men received similar advancement. The most damaging exchange came when Representative Wilson asked about the International Women's Day timing. "Ms. Sterling Morrison, wasn't the timing of Ms. Chen's termination specifically chosen to send a message to other women at your firm?" "Absolutely not. The timing was coincidental, ma'am. We have recordings of you saying exactly that." "Are you committing perjury in front of this committee?" Victoria's face went white. The recordings may not accurately reflect." "Ms. Sterling Morrison, are you now claiming that your own voice on these recordings isn't accurate?" She had no answer. The hearing continued for another 2 hours, but Victoria never recovered from that moment. By the time she left the witness table, her credibility was completely destroyed. 6 months after my termination, Sterling and Associates ceased to exist as an independent company. Victoria Sterling Morrison resigned in disgrace, selling her remaining stake to a private equity firm that immediately changed the name and management structure. The $800 million Blackstone merger was permanently dead, replaced by a fire sale that valued Sterling at less than $200 million. The class action lawsuit I'd helped trigger was settled for $47 million, distributed among 43 current and former female employees who'd faced discrimination. My personal settlement was confidential, but it was substantial enough to ensure I'd never have to worry about financial security again. More importantly, the Sterling case had triggered a wave of similar investigations across Wall Street. The SEC announced new reporting requirements for financial firms' diversity data. The Department of Labor created a new task force focused on gender discrimination in high-paying industries. 3 other major firms settled discrimination cases rather than face the public scrutiny that had destroyed Sterling, but the most satisfying outcome was Personal.ai. In September, I launched in capital management from a gleaming office in downtown Manhattan. My firm specialized in ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance-focused portfolios that aligned profit with principles. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who'd been fired for asking inconvenient questions was now running a firm built on accountability. My first hire was Jennifer Walsh, the portfolio manager Sterling had terminated after landing a major client. My second was Patricia Rodriguez, who'd been fired during maternity leave. One by one, I recruited the women Sterling had discarded, building a team that combined exceptional talent with shared purpose. Within 6 months, Chen Capital had raised $300 million in assets under management. Our performance was exceptional, 15% returns in a flat market, driven by investments in companies with genuine commitments to equality and sustainability. The business press loved the story. Fortune put me on their cover with the headline, "The Revenge That Reformed Wall Street." Bloomberg wrote a feature about how discrimination victims were becoming industry leaders. Harvard Business School added the Sterling case to their curriculum as a study in corporate accountability. But the moment that mattered most came in March 2025, exactly 1 year after my termination. International Women's Day fell on a Saturday, so we celebrated on Friday with an event at our offices. 50 women from across the financial industry gathered to discuss barriers, solutions, and the ongoing fight for equality. As I looked around the room, filled with portfolio managers, analysts, executives, and entrepreneurs who refused to be silenced, I realized that Victoria Sterling Morrison had actually done me a favor. By trying to make an example of me, she'd created a symbol. By trying to send a message about women who asked inconvenient questions, she'd inspired thousands more to start asking them. Sarah Nightingale, who'd become a close friend, approached me as the event was winding down. "Any regrets?" she asked. I thought about the question seriously. The past year had been brutal at times: death threats from Sterling loyalists, smear campaigns, the constant pressure of being a public figure in a controversial case. There had been nights when I'd wondered if taking Victoria's settlement offer might have been the easier path. But then I thought about Emily Sterling Morrison, who'd found the courage to speak out against her own mother. About Jennifer Walsh and Patricia Rodriguez, who'd rebuilt their careers after being discarded. About the dozens of women who'd contacted me to share their own stories of discrimination and thank me for showing them that fighting back was possible. "No regrets," I told Sarah. "They thought they were ending my career. Instead, they gave me a purpose." As the guests filed out and the staff cleaned up, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, Victoria Sterling Morrison was probably wondering how her carefully planned message had backfired so spectacularly. She'd wanted to show other women what happened when you asked too many questions, demanded too much, refused to stay in your assigned role. Instead, she'd shown them what was possible when you documented everything, built strategic alliances, and refused to be silenced. The message had been sent, all right. Just not the one she'd intended. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant: "Congressional hearing on pay equity tomorrow. They're requesting your testimony again." I smiled and typed back, "Except it's time to ask more inconvenient questions." Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, full of ambition and opportunity and the promise that tomorrow could be different from today. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged, not as someone's employee, grateful for whatever recognition they chose to give me, but as a leader who'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. They'd fired me on International Women's Day thinking it would be the end of my story. They were wrong. It was just the beginning. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads. Star.